Last Sunday, I sat on my porch and started making a list. Not a to-do list, a list of everything I was failing to do by sitting still. The garden needed weeding, the dishwasher needed unloading. There was an email I'd been meaning to answer for 9 days. I had been outside for exactly 4 minutes. I caught myself mid-sentence. Okay, after this cup of tea, I'll just... and stopped. Just stopped. Because I realized I was doing the thing I talk to clients about every single week, except I was doing it to myself, on my own porch, in my own life. I was trying to earn a few quiet minutes like rest was a reward I hadn't qualified for yet. If that sounds even a little familiar, if you've ever felt guilty for sitting down, like stillness is something you have to justify before you're allowed to have it, you're exactly where you need to be today. Welcome to Breathe and Begin. I'm Sarah, psychologist, single mom, recovering physicist, and a woman who has spent a long time learning the difference between resting and collapsing, mostly by doing the second one and calling it the first. I started this show because the people who taught me the most weren't case studies in a textbook. They were people I actually know, people I love. Some weeks, the person is me. If anything in today's episode lands for you, tell me about it in the comments. I genuinely read them, and I'd love to know where you recognized yourself. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that too. Not because the algorithm needs it, though between us, it absolutely does, because these conversations are better when we keep having them week after week, instead of just once. Today, we're sitting with something that sounds simple and is in practice almost nobody's experience. You do not have to earn your rest. You don't need to hit some invisible quota of suffering or output before you're allowed to stop. I want to tell you how long it took me to actually believe that. Slowly, badly, and very late in life, because I suspect a fair number of you are still out there waiting for a permission slip that nobody is ever going to hand you. I'll tell you up front, this isn't going to be a tidy lesson about bubble baths. Rest, the way I mean it today, has very little to do with spa days and a great deal to do with whether you believe, underneath everything, that you're allowed to stop without first proving something. That belief gets built early, usually without anyone meaning to build it in us at all. So we're going to go back to where mine started, and then come forward to where I am now, and I hope somewhere in the middle of that you'll find your own thread. So let's get into it. I'll confess something. I'm a chronic list maker, even at rest. Give me a quiet hour and I'll fill it with invisible homework. Things I should be feeling, fixing, processing, improving. It's a strange, exhausting kind of busyness. The busyness of the mind once the body finally stops moving. Here's what I want you to notice this week, gently, without judging yourself for it. The exact moment rest begins and the guilt shows up right behind it. That little gap. We're going to spend the rest of this episode there, because I think that gap is where most of us actually live. Not resting, not working, just hovering over our own lives, half guilty, waiting for permission. It's a strangely exhausting place to live, that gap. You're not even getting the relief of rest, because part of you is still on duty. When I was 12, my mother got sick. Lupus, though we didn't have a name for it for a long time. Just the symptoms and the fear underneath them. Before that, our house smelled like the bread she baked most afternoons. After, it smelled like rubbing alcohol, because I learned to manage medications and notice bad days at an age when I should have been worrying about nothing more important than algebra and crushes. I became very good, very fast at being needed. And somewhere in that, nobody sat me down and taught it to me on purpose. I absorbed a rule that would quietly run my whole life from underneath. Rest is what happens after everyone else has been taken care of, if there's time left over. If you've ever run a household, or a job, or a childhood like that, you already know the ending to that sentence. There is never time left over. Here is the lie, stated plainly, because I think it deserves to be said out loud rather than just lived. Strength means needing nothing. Not strength means you can handle hard things. Needing nothing. That's a child's logic dressed up as a virtue, and an awful lot of us carried it straight into adulthood without ever once checking whether it was actually true. It isn't true. Needing rest is not a character flaw. It's biology. Your nervous system was never built to run at full output indefinitely. That's not a motivational line. That's just how stress and recovery work in a human body. But if you grew up earning love or safety through your usefulness, your body can be completely depleted, and your mind will still insist you haven't done quite enough yet to deserve the couch. I went into physics partly because it was clean. Equations didn't get sick overnight. They didn't need me at 2 in the morning. For a long stretch, being busy was genuinely a relief. And then, after I lost someone I loved very suddenly, busyness turned into something else entirely. It became a place to hide in plain sight. I planned a funeral with terrifying efficiency. I didn't cry once the whole day. People told me how strong I was. I called it, years later in therapy, outrunning the thing that was right behind me the entire time. There's nothing wrong with your nervous system doing that for a little while. It's actually a fairly common way bodies protect us from feelings too large to process all at once. The trouble starts when, for a little while, quietly becomes a whole personality. Some of you are running a version of that exact pattern right now, and you've gotten so good at it that it doesn't look like running anymore. It looks like a full calendar. It looks like being the reliable one, the one everyone leans on. It looks like never, ever slowing down long enough to feel the thing you've been avoiding since you don't even remember when. Years later, as a single mother raising 2 kids on a part-time university salary, rest stopped being a philosophical question and became a pure logistics problem. There simply wasn't any to find. I used to call it the relentless math of one. One income, one set of hands, one adult left standing at 11 at night when somebody has a fever and the dishes aren't done, and tomorrow starts at 6, regardless of whether you slept. I won't pretend that whole season wrapped up into a tidy lesson. Sometimes there genuinely isn't time to rest, and telling someone otherwise in that season is its own quiet cruelty. But even then, especially then, I started to notice something underneath the exhaustion. The tiredness I couldn't avoid was a different thing entirely from the guilt I kept layering on top of it. The exhaustion was real. The guilt, it turns out, was optional. I just hadn't realized that distinction yet. Looking back, I think the guilt was doing a strange kind of work for me. It made the exhaustion feel like evidence of devotion instead of just evidence of being depleted, as if being tired enough proved how much I loved my kids. It didn't need proving. They knew. I was the one who needed convincing. A client of mine, I'll call her Renee, told me once that she didn't realize she'd been clenching her jaw for 3 straight years until a dentist asked her about it during a routine checkup. 3 years. Her body had been quietly running a low-grade emergency the entire time, and her conscious mind had never once gotten the memo. I see this constantly in this work. People who will tell you completely sincerely that they're fine while their shoulders sit up around their ears and they haven't taken one full, easy breath since sometime last Tuesday. The body keeps an honest ledger, even when we don't. Headaches that show up like clockwork, a jaw that won't unclench, that specific bone-deep tiredness that a full night of sleep doesn't actually touch. That's not weakness announcing itself. That's information. I tell clients this isn't mystical. It's closer to plumbing than poetry. A body that's been bracing for a long time forgets, slowly, what unbracing feels like. It needs practice, not insight. You don't think your way out of a clenched jaw. You notice it, you unclench it, and you do that again tomorrow, and again the day after, until the body remembers it has another setting. I had another client, a composite really of several people who all said some version of the same thing, describe vacation as the hardest week of my whole year. Not because anything went wrong, because the second his to-do list disappeared, every feeling he'd been outrunning all year caught up with him in one quiet week on a beach, and it genuinely frightened him. I told him what I'll tell you now. If rest feels unbearable, that is not proof you don't deserve it. It's proof you've been running for a long time, and your body has finally found a moment to ask you how you're actually doing. It's an honest question. It just has terrible timing. So let's name the actual confusion here, because I think this is where most of us genuinely get stuck. We treat rest like a reward you unlock after enough output, instead of a requirement your body has regardless of output. Nobody is going to hand you a permission slip for this. There is no future point where the inbox is finally empty and the house is finally in order and everyone is finally fine, so now you've earned the couch. That point does not arrive. I've personally been waiting on it since roughly 1999. You are not lazy for being tired. You are a person in a body that runs on rest the same basic way a phone runs on a charger. Nobody scolds a phone for needing the wall. I want to be precise here, because the word rest gets used loosely. I don't only mean sleep, though sleep matters enormously, and most of us are quietly behind it. I mean the kind of stopping where your nervous system actually receives the signal that the threat has passed, even for 10 minutes. A walk without your phone, sitting on a porch and actually staying there instead of narrating your task list the whole time. Letting a question like, "Are you happy?" land for a second, instead of deflecting it with a joke and a change of subject. Some of you do this beautifully for everyone else and never once for yourselves. You'll notice when a friend is running on empty before they say a word. You'll cancel your own plans so someone else can rest. That instinct is generous. It's also, sometimes, a very polite way of avoiding the question of what you need. Rest isn't the opposite of a meaningful life. It's the thing that makes a meaningful life sustainable past next Tuesday. So, that Sunday, the list in my hand, the tea going cold beside me, I did something small that was, for me, genuinely difficult. I put the list down. Not because I'd finished anything on it, just because I decided for 10 minutes that being a person sitting quietly on a porch was a sufficient job for one Sunday morning. Nothing collapsed. The garden was still there Monday. The 9-day-old email got answered eventually, and the world, it turns out, kept running just fine without my constant supervision, which, if you're anything like me, is both a relief and slightly insulting to hear at the same time. Here's the one thing I most want to leave with you today. You don't get rest by earning it. You get rest because you're a human being, and human beings require it. Full stop. No asterisk, no quota, no permission slip needed from anyone, including yourself. If you're exhausted right now, genuinely, bone-deep tired, I'm not going to tell you to simply self-care your way out of a life that's actually too full. Sometimes the real work is structural, asking for help, saying no, redistributing what's been sitting entirely on your shoulders for too long. No amount of tea on a porch fixes a job or a household that's actually unsustainable. But underneath that practical work is a quieter permission you can start handing yourself today, this afternoon, on whatever counts as your porch. You are allowed to stop. Not because you've done enough, because you're tired. And that is, on its own, a complete sentence. I think about that Sunday often now. The list, the cooling tea, the strange relief of finally putting it down. I think about my mother's bread turning into rubbing alcohol, and the rule I built out of that loss. Strength means needing nothing, and how long it actually took me to take that rule apart. I think about Renee's jaw, and the beach that frightened a tired man more than any deadline ever had, and every one of you reading a silent list right now of things you should be doing instead of sitting still. You don't have to earn this. You just have to take it. If this episode found you somewhere you needed it, let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you'd like more of these conversations, stay close. Subscribe so we don't lose each other between episodes. Go put the list down, even just for 10 minutes. You've already done enough.